Okay, fine.
Welcome all. We are live. We are about to start now. I'm handing over the stage to Dr. Dipankar.
Welcome all, dear speaker and attendees who have logged in this day-long e-seminar on looming water crisis in India challenges ahead. It's a great day for us. We are all aware that the water, both globally and in India, it is the most critical as well as essential resource. Water is the essential ingredient for economic and societal headway, as well as to maintain the ecology and environment. Besides, climate change phenomenon is imposing an element of uncertainty on freshwater resource availability in space and time domain. Because of unplanned and unsustained extraction of water, however, the crisis is looming large in different parts of the world as well as in India, both volumetrically as well as quality-wise. To have a detailed discussion of the issues and urgent actions, those are needed for striving for sustainable use of water, this one-day e-seminar is being organized. The opening sessions, in these opening sessions, we have some of the most distinguished minds on water in India. The speakers are Dr. Manav Chakraborty, Mr. G. Sripati, Dr. J.R. Chintala, Mrs. Corny Demens, and then Dr. K.R. Vishwanathan, and the chief guest of the opening session is Sri U.P. Singh, IAS Secretary, Ministry of Jal Shakti. There is minor change in the opening session. Since Mr. U.P. Singh has got some urgent work and he has to move out, this change has been done. So he will speak first, and that will be followed by the opening address by Manav Chakraborty and the other speakers in the inaugural session. So I have a brief biodata of Mr. U.P. Singh before I invite him to deliver his talk. Mr. Upendra Prasad Singh is currently the Secretary in the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Mr. Singh has did his BTech in Mechanical Engineering and MTech in Industrial and Management Engineering from IIT Kanpur. He is 1985 batch IAS officer and has held important position in the government of Odisha as well as in government of India, many departments and varied experience. Prior to becoming the Secretary of Jal Shakti, he was Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He was also Joint Secretary, Ministry of Steel. He served as Principal Secretary, Agriculture Department also in the state government of Odisha. He has an illustrious career and giving his mind now fully for last 4 or 5 years in water sector of India. Over to you, sir. We are eager to hear you. Thank you. Over to Sri U.P. Singh, sir.
Very good morning to you. Can you see me? Can you people hear me?
Yes, sir.
We are able to hear you, sir, but your video is not yet turned on.
I don't know then how to.
Can you click the three dots next to the icons at the bottom right? You'll have the video setting.
No, I don't find 3 dots.
What are the icons you're looking at the bottom? Do you find the video mic options?
Can I? 1 minute. Let me check. Okay. Fine. Sorry.
Yes, please.
I did not put my video on. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Now you're visible.
Yeah. Sorry. Very good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for 2 things. One, organizing this e-seminar, and then inviting me to deliver some of my thoughts. Actually, as Mr. Dipankar Saab was telling, I have been here for in this ministry, Ministry of Jal Shakti, earlier it was called Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation, for last 4.5 years actually, and as a secretary of uh, uh, Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation for 3 years. I am presently also looking after as a secretary of Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, where you have very important missions of Jal Jeevan Mission, providing tap water connection to almost 19 crore household in the country by 2024, and we also have Swachh Bharat Mission 2. But anyway, I would not be talking about that right now. When I remember when I joined this ministry, I also used to start all my topics with certain data and with the statement that India is facing one of its worst kind of water crisis, and we have 4% of the world's water resources available. We have 18% of the world's population to cater to. We have 17% of world's cattle population to cater to, and then we also used to say how per capita availability of water has been going down over the year. It's almost 1/4 than what it used to be at the time of independence, maybe 1/5. We also always talked about that how India's rainfall is very skewedly distributed over time and space. And then finally, what Dipankar Sahaji was also telling, how climate change has impacted recently the rainfall pattern are becoming more and more skewed actually. So number of rainy days, while total rainfall is not decreasing, the number of rainy days are coming down actually. All that is true. I am not saying that these are not true. All these are true. It's true that not only India, that world over we have a problem of water actually. But then now I feel that it's not really correct to say that India is really a water scarce country actually. My experience of last 4.5 years in this ministry, I have dealt water resources earlier in the state now. I am very confident that if we manage our water resources well, there is no reason why we should kind of face the crisis which a lot of people are predicting actually. In fact, I remember that earlier, whenever I used to go for this kind of a seminar, everyone used to talk to me about a statement or rather the assertion which was there in the Composite Water Management Index, which Niti Aayog has published in 2018. That was first CWMI actually. And there it says that 21 cities are going to run out of groundwater. But people had forgotten the groundwater word also. In fact, a lot of people used to ask me, is it true that 21 cities in India are going to run out of water by 2020? Fortunately, summer of 2020 is over actually, and sorry, I'll change the slide setting. So 2020 is over, and none of the cities have run out of groundwater, leave apart the running out of water itself actually. Because I feel that a country which gets more than 1,000 millimeter rainfall, true, there is a skewed distribution over time, because most of the rainfall we get only in monsoon season, and that too on a limited number of rainy days. It is also true that it's very skewed over space. A spatial distribution of water is also bad. We get maybe more than 5,000 millimeter at some places in India. On the other hand, we get maybe less than 300 or 400 millimeter of rainfall in certain parts of the country. But I still have I have a strong belief that a country which gets more than 1,000 millimeter of rainfall a year will not run out of water actually. All we need to do is we need to manage our water well. Now, generally, inefficiency is a bad word actually, but I think that our inefficiency in a way is our strength. We utilize our water resources very inefficiently actually. In fact, the latest data shows, I do not know, some people are doubt that data, but one of the data says that 89% of our water is used in agriculture. And when we talk of agriculture water use efficiency, the agriculture water use efficiency in India is supposed to be something between 35 to 40%. So in common man's parlance, one can say that we are utilizing 2 to 3 times more water than what is required actually. I remembered when Honorable Prime Minister was launched a new program called Atal Jal or Atal Bhujal Yojana in Vigyan Bhavan last year on 25th of December. ही सेड कि भाई हम पानी किसको देते हैं, हम पानी की जरूरत पौधे को है कि पानी की जरूरत खेत को है. सो बी इरिगेटेड फील्ड्स एक्चुअली, वी डू नॉट इरिगेट ओनली क्रॉप्स व्हिच रिक्वायर वाटर and not only so water use efficiency in agriculture sector is very low. Similarly, if we look at the industry, let's say for per capita steel production or a per unit of paper production, how much water we consume and how much water is consumed by the best in the world or best in the India itself actually. And we will find that our water use efficiency even in industrial sector is pretty poor. Take the case of our urban water supply. Forget about right now rural water supply, but urban water supply itself. Now, I remember that very recently I attended two of such e-seminars or webinars where with me was Honorable Ambassador of Denmark actually. And he was saying that in Denmark, non-revenue water is 6% of the country, in the whole country on an average. Whereas in Delhi itself, perhaps non-revenue water is to the extent of more than 40%, between 40 to 50% actually. So we are very inefficient as far as the use of water in agriculture is concerned, the use of water in industry is concerned, the municipal water supply is concerned, and that inefficiency in a way is a strength for us in my opinion. In the sense that if we become even 10% more efficient in agriculture, we will get so much of extra water. The other, so that's first point I wanted to make. The second point is everybody starts talking of that our requirement of water will increase to such an extent by 2030 or 2040 or 2050 that our water supply would be much less than water demand actually. But my point is, why should demand increase so much? It is not necessary that water requirement should increase in proportion to the population. Most of the people basically extrapolate the population growth and then they say that our requirement would go so much. The countries after countries have shown. Take the case of USA. If my data is correct, in last 20 years, USA has not seen any increase in their water demand actually. In fact, the Canadian ambassador the other day was saying that their water requirement in last 20 years has gone down by 50% actually. So again, what has happened that we have in the country, we have basically concentrated on supply side management of water. We have not bothered about demand side management of water. If we have demand side management of water as our focus, which is one of the focus under Atal Bhujal Yojana, then there is no reason that increase which everybody is predicting should actually come through. The other is that everybody keeps talking of that in India, we have only about 50% of area under irrigation and we have to increase so much of irrigation coverage. I am not saying we should not increase in the irrigation coverage, but it is not necessary. See, if you see the figure of the world as a whole, not many people, some of you may be surprised to find out that only 20% of area is under assured irrigation actually. 80% of the area in the world is under rain-fed conditions. I do agree that our rainfall pattern is different than the rainfall pattern in many other countries in the world. But a lot of crops can be grown in rain-fed conditions. Unfortunately, in fact, yesterday only we had a water talk. We organize a water talk every month on third Friday from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. And yesterday we had someone who was speaking, is not really a great water scientist or not a technocrat or not a bureaucrat. Yesterday the gentleman who spoke, many of you may be aware of his name, is called Lakshman Singh. Lakshman Singh, whenever we talk of water management in the country, the names of two villages always comes. One comes Hibre Bazaar, where Popat Rao Pawar, example of how he managed the water, and the other is the name we take is that of Lapuria in Rajasthan, where Lakshman Singh started his Chauka system actually. And yesterday he spoke and it was an eye opener to many of us still, I would say, who manage water actually, in the sense that it is not that every crop by the sheer soil moisture, certain crops can be grown actually. And not only that, when I'm talking of growing crops in India, unfortunately, I would say that we still have a perverse incentive for growing the crops where they should not be grown actually. Take the case of Punjab. Punjab was not growing paddy till early 80s or so. But today, so much paddy is grown in Punjab. Now, someone says that no, this is a failure of the Ministry of Agriculture or Department of Agriculture in the states. They have not been able to wean away the farmers from growing water-intensive crop to less water-intensive crop. But farmers will grow something which will fetch him good prices, something which he can sell very easily. Now, what is that which led to growing so much of a paddy, let's say in Punjab or Haryana, which are not at all suited for growing paddy crop? And that is primarily because of 2-3 regions actually. The first region is basically of free electricity. So Punjab farmers gets free electricity. Of course, water is free, but the extraction is also free actually. So either they have free electricity or a very, very cheap, highly subsidized electricity. And the second is that our procurement system, we basically procure primarily wheat and paddy and sugarcane. And these are the 3 crops which consume almost 80% of water in the agriculture sector. So we have to basically bring in certain policy changes, certain program, certain incentives and disincentives so that a particular crop is grown where it should be grown actually. It is not that like Maharashtra, which is one of the least endowed in terms of water, grows perhaps maximum sugarcane. Of course, number of things are being done and it has been done. It is being done. Like Haryana has started Mera Pani Meri Virasat, whereby they are weaning away farmers by giving incentive from the paddy to a non-paddy crops. Maharashtra has started basically a scheme whereby in a certain time they are converting all their sugar cane cultivation to a drip irrigation actually. Similarly, Punjab has also taken some initiative. Punjab started on a something called Bijli Bachao Paisa Kamao. Those kind of, but they are basically right now also I would say pilots. They have to be taken on a much larger scale. So I just gave you an example of a agriculture sector where a lot of water can be saved if we have certain policy in plan, certain schemes in place, and we also start growing a crop which is basically suited to particular agroclimatic condition. We already have under Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, we have a fairly big scheme of per drop more crop to promote micro irrigation. Micro irrigation in the country has seen increase by leaps and bounds, but ours is a huge country. Ours is not a country like Israel. Ours is not a country like Singapore or Dubai. Ours is a very big country, very diverse country. So something which is done at one place needs to be basically replicated and multiplicated. But why I gave the example of Hibre Bazaar or Laporia was that both Hibre Bazaar and Laporia, both these places gets a rainfall which is not more than 400-500 millimeter rainfall. Now, if someone can manage, a village can manage its water requirement, be it for agriculture, be it for cattle, be it for drinking water, all requirements are met with 400-500 millimeter rainfall. There is no reason when that why we should talk of a water shortage at places where gets on an average more than 1,000 millimeter rainfall. In my opinion, apart from increasing the efficiency of water use, increasing water use efficiency, there are a few other paradigm shifts which we perhaps need to make, and we are working towards that. See, as I mentioned earlier, our emphasis was earlier only on supply side management. And on supply side management, whenever we talked, basically we talked about storage in big dams. I remember sometimes back our honorable minister made a presentation to honorable members of parliament, and there when he asked which is the largest storage, water storage structure you think, and then someone started saying, someone says Indira Sagar in Madhya Pradesh, someone says Sardar Sarovar, someone says Hirakud, someone says Bhakra Nangal, and then minister said no, our the biggest water storage is basically underground water storage. All our big dams put together have less water storage than the water that is stored in the aquifers beneath the earth actually. But unfortunately, we have not paid enough attention to that storage actually. We talk in terms of filling the different kinds of dams, but we don't talk really so much in terms of filling the largest structure which nature has provided us, and which is a groundwater actually. And that's why these days, whenever I have to speak to someone, I talk of 5 hours of water actually. The 5 hours of water, of course, 3 hours during school days, we learned about 3 hours of reading, writing, arithmetic. Then, of course, when we started wastewater management or waste management, we started talking of 3 other hours, and that was reduce, recycle, and reuse. But then the 2 more hours, which are very important for water, in my opinion, the 4th hour is recharge. We must recharge our groundwater actually. मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ कि अगर धरती माँ हमको तब पानी पिलाएगी जब हम धरती माँ को पानी पिलाएंगे. Unfortunately, we are not have given enough importance of recharge of groundwater, and consequences are for everyone to see. हम पानी निकालते तो रहते हैं लेकिन उसमें पानी डालते नहीं. It's like see, there is not, everybody now understands that there is not unlimited amount of water beneath this earth. So if we keep extracting and we do not kind of replenish, then a time will come when aquifers will run dry actually. So we need to recharge. Of course, 5th hour is slightly different, which I have I try to advocate. Is the 5th hour is respect actually. We must respect the water. India has been a country where water has been respected from time immemorial. Unfortunately, sometimes we have lost that respect for our water, not only water but water bodies. We talk our rivers as sacred, but we do not show the kind of respect which a sacred river should have, or even all other water bodies actually. We know all cities. Right now we are sitting in Delhi. Many people know that how many water bodies we used to have in Delhi. Bangalore was known as city of lakes. Chennai have very large number of lakes and water bodies. Now somehow we have allowed the water bodies to die actually. They have been encroached upon, they have silted upon, they have become a receptacle for a solid and liquid waste management. We have encroached, or we have blocked the channels which used to take water to those water bodies. As a result, today you have all these new phenomena, not really new phenomena, but you have a phenomena of urban flooding actually. How does the urban flooding takes place? Water, of course, one problem is the rainfall pattern, which is now is becoming more weird because of the climate change maybe. But then water which used to fall in a city either used to go down. Now it can't go down because we have cemented or concreted everywhere. So water cannot go down. Now water can't go into a water body also, because either the water body doesn't exist, or the water body, the channel which used to take water to the water bodies, has been blocked actually. So as a result, the water will enter the some on our houses only actually. So in my opinion, while now scope for large structures, large dams are very limited now for a number of reasons. I am not getting into the question whether we should build large dams or not. It's a positive, negatives. I am not getting into that question. But even if we want to build, today on the best sites, dams have already been constructed. Secondly, you have a serious problem of land acquisition. You have serious problem of resettlement, rehabilitation, environment problem, wildlife management problems, all kinds of problems are there. So in my opinion, on supply side, what we need to do is, in supply side, we should concentrate on very large number of smaller structures. If we can rejuvenate each and every water body which we had at one point of time in the country, and we try to kind of a khet talab kind of thing, we try to have as many farm ponds as possible. So supply side management will have to have a little shift from very large structures to maybe a millions and millions of smaller structures actually. And the other, of course, which I told you, a demand side management. And for that, it is very necessary that we manage our water in a participatory manner. The Atal Bhujal Yojana, again, why I am referring time and again, is this is not a very big scheme. This is a small scheme in terms of its reach right now, or in terms of financial outlay. But what is important about Atal Bhujal Yojana, why I will take 2 minutes on that, is its approach. We talk of participatory groundwater management. We had not talked about participatory groundwater management in the government sector. A lot of non-government organizations have been doing participatory groundwater management. But now we are talking a participatory groundwater management where villagers themselves would not only measure, let's say, a rainfall or the groundwater level increase or decrease, how much water is basically runoff, how much water is being recharged. Two, they will also prepare what is called a water budgeting actually. How much water they are getting, how much water they are spending. And if there is a deficit budget, then they will have what is called a water security plan in place and take the demand side and supply side management. This is what has happened in a place like Hibre Bazaar and also. But now we need to create a lakhs of Hibre Bazaar. So that's very important. The maybe now the last point I would like to make, because I think I have spoken at length, is basically we do need to have a little better knowledge of water and river actually. Not many, I'm not talking about the experts who are sitting here, they certainly have knowledge about waters and rivers. But I have failed over last 4 years. For example, last about 4 years back, little more than 4 years back, when I had joined as Director General for National Mission for Clean Ganga, people were talking of cleaning Ganga. People were not talking of rejuvenating Ganga. And everybody used to talk of only a sewage management of industrial effluent management. But then I realized that for a river rejuvenation, while management of sewage, management of industrial effluent is important, but what is most important, what do you need for a river? You need water actually. Professor Tare once, right in the beginning when I had joined in one of these kind of seminars, he spoke. He says that the river is one that flows. So something which doesn't flow is not a river. So by that count, Yamuna for 8 months in Delhi ceases to be a river actually because it doesn't flow. We have overexploited so much of surface water as well as groundwater that we are not leaving any water for the river actually. Now, where does the water, lean season water comes into the river? During rainy season, almost all rivers are in a spate. But after a few months, you find that water is not there in the river. Either we have basically exploited all the water upstream. Take the case of even Ganga. Why Yamuna? Take the case of Ganga. Ganga, what happens that we have at Haridwar itself, a Bhim Gora barrage, we take almost 75% of water. Then we have a Chaudhary Charan Singh barrage at Bijnor. And then we go to Narora and we find that then we have Narora barrage is also there. And you go into lean season and just stand on the Narora barrage, you find nothing flows beneath the Narora barrage. Again, Ganga gets water maybe when other tributary or distributary join a river Ganga actually. So one is that we are overexploiting surface water. But then groundwater is worse actually. In the sense that lean season flow in a particular river comes because of the water which goes into aquifer. Now we have overexploited so much aquifers that water doesn't flow back. The rivers which used to be a gaining river are no longer a gaining river. They have become a losing river actually. So similarly, so otherwise in the beginning, I didn't see a connect between a groundwater exploitation and the flow in a river. But now I find that there is a very good connect between the two. So if we can manage our groundwater well, we would be able to revive our rivers as well. Because rivers requires water actually. So similarly, let's say take the case of floodplains. Many people understand floodplains. Everybody is talking about floods and floods. See, floods should be there. Floods had been there in the country. Floods should be there in the future also. If you have more climate change impact, there would be more kind of extreme events in terms of both frequency as well as in terms of its magnitude actually, amplitude. So, but then we need to minimize the impact of these floods actually. Now, maximum damage of floods takes place because we have encroached upon a land which rightly belongs to river actually, what is called floodplains. Now we make all kinds of constructions on floodplains, we do agriculture on floodplains. So many of us do not understand the importance of floodplains. A river requires room for the river kind of concept which is there in some of the western countries. So room for the river, that room is basically floodplains. So we must protect or we must respect floodplains. That floodplains belongs to the river, floodplains doesn't belong to us. So floodplains doesn't only kind of allow water to be spread during the monsoon season. It stores a lot of water actually, and that water will come back to the river when the river needs water for its flow. So it's very important to understand rivers, understand water, and that's why we find that even water literacy is very important. We have started certain things, but right from, because when you ask a student, then a student, what is where does the water come from? He doesn't understand aquifer. He understands basically a tap. So he thinks that water comes from tap, but tap is only a dispenser. Tap is not something which provides water actually. So that's why in Jal Jeevan Mission, where we have taken up this providing every household with a tap connection by 2024. Right now we are implementing a 100 days mini campaign within that, and that is providing a tap water connection to every schools and Anganwadi centers. And that's why I'm asking all the states, I have requested all the states that while you are providing a tap connection in a school, why don't you build a rooftop rainwater harvesting on every school building? And it has been done in the country in many districts. Even before MGNREGA allowed construction of rooftop rainwater harvesting, Badodara district magistrate Shalini Agrawal, I'm just giving one example. She built 1,000 schools. She built 1,000 rooftop rainwater harvesting, and without a government scheme, maybe sourcing funds from CSR, district mineral fund, etc. Now, it's not important how much water. That's important, but it's not only importance is not that how much water we are able to harvest from the rooftop of those 1,000 schools. At least in those 1,000 schools, children understand why is it that this structure is being made on my roof? Why is rooftop rainwater harvesting is important? Where does the water go? Why should we put the water in the earth actually? So it will provide a lot of education. So there is, I'm just giving an example of the schools actually. We have tremendous scope for rainwater harvesting everywhere. And that's why right now, this monsoon season, we ran a campaign called Catch the Rain Where It Falls When It Falls. I think we need to catch the rain where it falls when it falls. And the scope is everywhere. Take the case of Delhi. Whether it's a government building, whether it's a private building, whether it's a university, whether it's a railway station, whether it's airports, whether it's stadiums, you go to any ordnance factory, you have thousands of acres of land. You go to any cantonment area, you have thousands of acres of land. You go to IIT, IIMs, they have thousands of acres of land. And all them, both built up area as well as open area, has tremendous scope for rainwater harvesting. So friends, I would not like to, water is such a subject where one can perhaps speak for hours. I have already spoken at length, but I would say that let us find, you talk about the urgency. Let's not, I don't consider it an emergency. Many times emergency people don't take the right steps. So we must understand that yes, a challenge, meeting the water challenges is an urgent need actually. And there is nothing to be really paranoid actually, because we have enough rainfall in this country. If we conserve that water, if we utilize that water judiciously, if we understand the issues relating to water, rivers, etc., well, we have a respect for water, then there is no reason why our country should run out of water. So unfortunately, I have to, because I was supposed to go on tour actually, I delayed my departure by a couple of hours basically because I was not sure that while I'm traveling whether I would be able to connect from the vehicle or not. So that's what I have stayed back. I would have liked, of course, to listen to some of you here, but unfortunately I have to leave. So first of all, thank you very much once again for the organizers, everyone who is connected right now, and I wish e-seminar all success. And of course Dipankar Saha had been with us earlier also, so I would request Dipankar Saha that whatever important recommendations, deliberations which comes out of today's e-seminar, he will bring to our notice, which will help us in maybe we are right now in the midst of revising our national water policy. We are almost at the end of it, so maybe some of the policy prescriptions, and also in kind of modifying some of our schemes and programs which would can be implemented more effectively to ensure water security of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for coming in spite of your busy schedule and delivering a thoughtful and encouraging address. Thank you again, sir, and we'll like to hear you again, all of us. So with that, we can progress further.
Fine.
Our
I will have to leave actually. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, sir. Right, sir. So we'll go ahead with our program. So as per the schedule that was originally kept, now may I request Dr. Manav Chakraborty to deliver the welcome address. Dr. Manav Chakraborty holds a PhD from University of Delhi on impact investment and MBA from Kellogg Business School and an MSc in environmental economics from University College of London and MA in development studies from the Institute of Social Studies. He is the CEO of PNP, which is the force behind organizing this the seminar, and he has wide experience in more than 25 years in many international organizations. I am not going to read; it will be lengthy. So, with this brief introduction, I will request now Manav Chakraborty to deliver the welcome address. Dr. Manav Chakraborty, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shah, for the kind words. I have a very pleasant duty to recognize the august presence of Secretary Singh, who spoke at length, and I might be repeating some of the points that he had mentioned. Chairman Pati, Chairman Chintala, Mrs. Corinne Demarche, and also my own boss, Dr. Vishwanathan. We need to also recognize the untiring efforts put in by Dr. Saad, Jayesh, our PNP colleagues, and the WAPRO partners to bring together almost who's who in the water field in the country. I am both delighted and humbled by their presence. Let me start with a small tale from my childhood. My father was in the CPWD, and whenever his bosses wanted, he has to be transferred from one part of the country to the other part. So we used to take long train journeys, and during the train journeys, my mother used to insist on two things: carry enough food on the train, and secondly, have a bag full of copper coins with a hole in the center. So as the train would cross any river, all the kids were supposed to fold their hands and throw some coins into the river. This was a way of showing our respect to the river, allowing us to pass over it and unharmed. So you can imagine, travel from Kolkata to Dimapur, how many rivers we crossed and how many times we used to stand with the folded hands. But that was not enough. Every Tuesday we had to go and find banyan tree, water it. We used to also attend all kinds of ceremonies, religious ceremonies, whether it is connected with the first offering of hair to the deities or the last rites. So we are a civilization which is very closely connected with the river. Yet, as the secretary mentioned, we also abuse, humiliate, and violate the very nature. Our treatment of water is like a bank which has only borrowers and no depositors. I am not aware that how many banks can really survive if you do not put back what you take. In the many small ways, what my mother was trying to tell us, that we have to keep the 5 elements of life: the akash, the space, the sky, air, vayu, fire, agni, water, and earth, all in good humor. As soon as there is a disbalance, our life is not going to be very pleasant. And all of us who are in Delhi know that very well. Our air is poisonous, toxic, the sky is murky, and the water is extremely polluted. And about cleanliness, I would not like to compare us with anyone else. So restoring the reverence to nature, I suppose, is necessary, but that's not itself sufficient. We have to look for good governance in water. Water perhaps is too much centralized in the hands of the water bureaucracy. It needs to be decentralized in the hands of the panchayats and the people who deal with it. We need smart technology. We need better scientific understanding, and also recharging the groundwater. But above all, I think there has to be a change in the mindset which rewards and advances conservation, sustainable use, and equitable sharing of benefits between human beings, animals, and ecosystems. I think we human beings have taken too much from nature and not allowed the ecosystems to function properly. I am glad that all of you have joined this initiative with the crisis, the looming crisis that humanity has created for itself. There is a lot of hope, as the Secretary have rightfully mentioned. If we take the right measures, we can overcome it. We would save the future generations from a lot of suffering. So we look forward to hearing and learning from all of you, individually as well as collectively, to find ways to solve this gigantic problem. I'm glad that all of you have joined us to be good and to do good to the nature. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Shah.
Dr. Sir, you got reconnected now. Is Dr. Manav has completed his speech, or you can take it over?
Hello.
Right. Dr. Dipankar, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, Chintala here.
Yes.
In between there was a little bit of network drop.
Just 1 minute, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. G.R. Chintala, Chairman NABARD. We are eager to hear him. He holds a brief about Dr. Chintala. He holds a postgraduate from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, New Delhi. He held various positions in NABARD and worked in various capacities at the head office and regional offices throughout India. He served as Vice President of Agri Business Finance Limited, Hyderabad, Director of Bankers Institute of Rural Development, Lucknow, and Managing Director of NAB Fins, a subsidiary of NABARD headquartered at Bengaluru. He has handled several consultancy assignments whose recommendation helped in launching national rural livelihood mission throughout the country. He also introduced the producers organization model in many places like in Andaman and Nicobar Island, a very distinguished character, and handling the bank, which I would say one of the major force for rural development and water related issues development in India. The stage is over to you, Dr. Chintala, for your presentation. Thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Dipankar Saha. I am extremely delighted to join this August forum, which is discussing a very crucial topic, that is the looming water crisis. And with all respects to my previous speakers, Shri U.P. Singh and also Shri Manav Chakravarti, who spoke at length about really what is happening in the entire water scenario. I say that maybe that looming crisis definitely, though it is not a paranoid kind of a situation, but at the same time, I can say as a financier and a developmental financial institution, and also who worked in almost all the geographies of the country for the past 35 years, who had seen the entire how the depletions of both groundwater, then abuse of water, and finally really how some of the areas are turning into a kind of a nightmare for the policymakers and also the financial. So now, as a developmental financial institution of the country, and which is very unique in the world, we are the one development financial institution close to around $80+ billion of business and consistently making profit ever since its inception. We are having a footprint in many of the areas of the agriculture and rural development, and water is one of the major area of our operations. Now, I work in many of the places, as a student of agriculture, when I used to travel from my place to Delhi for the first time, I used to see that maybe various kinds of states where the water rainfall patterns differ. If I start with maybe some place in Andhra Pradesh, maybe some part of Andhra Pradesh was as arid as Rajasthan, like Anantapur. Now you just come to maybe some other place in Madhya Pradesh, it's very lush green and so much of a water. But at the same time, you just travel through the Rajasthan and part of it actually that is almost arid with maybe some places having less than 200 mm of rainfall. And at the same time, when I was looking into really what happened since 80s, ever since I started looking into the issues, and also really how the things are shaped up right now. In 1980s, when I was postgraduate student, in Delhi, I used to go to Punjab and Haryana. That time, as Manav Chakravarti was telling, and also V.P. Singh was telling that there was no paddy cultivation that time. And so that there was absolutely no buzz about the groundwater. So now the entire green revolution, the initial stages were the wheat based in the northern plains. And people were very happy that there was nothing to talk about, because there is plenty of groundwater available in both Punjab and Haryana at that time, and there was quite a lot of a recharge, and the new irrigation projects of that time started giving a lot of canal water to the states, so they are doing the whole thing. But over a period of time, we changed quite a lot. Maybe as a nation, we went into a different kind of a trajectory, saying that now we produce quite a lot of rice, we produce quite a lot of wheat, and these are the two crops which are the main staples for the country. And the Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh have jumped the bandwagon. And though the water, not the surplus states like Bihar and the eastern states are still lagging behind in the rice productivity, but the states of Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh have made a leap, a quantum leap in the productivity part, and are producing close to 5 tons per hectare. But at the same time, these 5 tons per hectare has come with a kind of a price to pay. So now when I was looking into that time, that when the first time paddy cultivation started, which people thought it's so good to cultivate paddy in Punjab, Haryana, which are not traditional, and straight away we can increase the production of the country. And it happened, people are happy, government is happy, procurement agencies are happy. But at the same time, now over the past maybe 20-30 years, it got its deleterious effect. So now here I will say that the groundwater depletion was so real in Punjab, we just can't imagine really how it is affecting. And I used to move around in some other places, in both Ropa district, Gurdaspur, Hoshiarpur and other places. If you go that the groundwater level has gone to such to the deepest level, it started getting all the unwanted elements like arsenic, selenium, carbon, just name any kind of a material that is there, which is coming in the water. And that water has become a drinking water, and which led to the health problems also. So now, there are issues which we have to look into in this water management. One part is creating a sustainable water systems and structures. Second one is the delivery mechanism. And third one is assessing the demand and try to supply the water to the people. And fourth one is how to sustain, because ultimately the civilizations will get sustained only with maybe water. The moment the water is not there, it will be like another Harappa Mohenjo-daro. That is what we used to see, because earlier many people were in a kind of a quandary, how suddenly the great civilizations have vanished. Now you can find maybe some other literature available saying that for 900 years there was no rainwater, rainfall in those areas of the great civilization. and people slowly started deserting, people have died, and ultimately nothing other things have come. So now, I'm not saying that this kind of a doomsday predictions are there right now, and it is going to be reality, because when I look into the long period average rainfall, actually we hardly had any kind of a difference. I think we are nation as a whole getting a similar amount of rainfall for the past 150 years, close to around 800 millimeters to 1000 millimeters, depending on the geography. And we are having close to around 400 billion cubic meters of 4,000 billion cubic meters of water, and the utilizable part is around 1150, while we are already exploiting close to around 790 billion cubic meters. So now, only thing is, when compared to if you just take that gross water available divided by the population, at independence we had maybe 3 times of the water available per capita. Today it is less, but that doesn't mean really people are really having any kind of a great kind of a scarcity in utilization of water. But one thing which I can say, because as a bank which is working throughout the country and also on various issues, I find that the scenario which was given earlier by the first speaker, Honorable Secretary, that there is nothing called a scarcity, that's called a scaremongering, but I can say that some of the places need a different kind of a treatment. You cannot make the whole India as one kind of a geographical entity and make a policy, because when I'm looking into the whole thing, I was working in Andaman for 2 years, and if I look into it, that Andaman receives close to around 3,400 millimeters of rainfall in not even 52 days. Actually, there the rainfall days are also close to around 90 rainfall days are there. But at the same time, in the peak summer, you have the water scarcity, because there are hardly any areas to store the water, because that was the peculiarity of that place. But in case of the rest of the country, storable areas are not an issue, but at the same time, over a period of time, there is a public outcry, there is a green warriors, there is a kind of a green tribunals, verdicts, rehabilitation, maybe creating the structures which are ecologically and eco-friendly kind of a thing. So now all these things are having their own kind of issues to do the things. But at the same time, we have created quite a lot of big irrigation structures, and why I am telling you that NABARD is one of the major financiers. In the last 25 years, we have done close to around 3.5 lakh crores worth of financing to various rural infrastructure development fund, of which I think close to around 150 lakh crores has gone only for, maybe I can say that 1.5 lakh crores has gone only for the irrigation structures. And with this, we created close to around 32 million hectares of additional irrigation area in various geographies. And also, so much of maybe I can say that sustainability has been brought to those areas. But at the same time, now when I look into it, really there is a need for a paradigm shift in our thinking, because one part is having the storage structures, their maintenance, avoiding the loss and other things. The second thing is the distribution effort. Now that the distribution of water through the open canal system was good, cost efficient, but at the same time, now when I am looking into the whole thing, actually that it is very inefficient way of doing it. Now, one of the projects which we have financed in Gujarat, that is under that Nanda project, one thing where they have started a project called Sauni project. Now, if you see the whole thing, that in place like Saurashtra, where the land is uneven, it's like a trough, and thing is it's very difficult and it's very hot also. The evaporation losses will be very high, and in such places, they have gone to the distribution water to the big pipelines. Now, I think the time has come for us to look into it, whether the water from the irrigation structures can be transported over a longer distances through pipelines, so that you can reduce almost 90 to 100% of the evaporation loss, and it's very easy to take water to even to those thatched areas also. The second thing which we are very seriously investing money with the collaboration of the state and union governments is the micro irrigation. Now, it's very heartening to see that the micro irrigation, 3-point sprinkler irrigation, have increased the productivity to a very high level. And when we are looking into this is actually the government of India. Otherwise, also these efforts were there for quite some time, and the subsidy programs were there to increase it. But thing is, of late, there is a lot of appreciation for this micro irrigation efforts and the water efficiency. And a special scheme created by the government of India, which is administered by NABARD. We have created quite a lot of micro irrigation structures. Now I will say that the time has come for us. India may not be like Israel, but there are many places in India which are like Israel, which are water patch and which require maybe such kind of a treatment. And also I feel that whenever we are producing the horticultural crops, why at all we should flood the entire field with few hectare meters of water, while it requires only few millimeters of water. So now that is where the micro irrigation, we are trying to look into it as to really how this is going to do it. And we are going in a very big way to finance the micro irrigation structures. And the third one is with regard to the conserving water in situ, that is to the watershed programs. NABARD, along with the governments and also the foreign donors, also we created quite a lot of watershed sheds in the country. And the effort is a continuous process. I am not saying that what we have done in the final, but thing is, it's every day there is a kind of new requirement. Now, right now, we have created watersheds with our own kind of involvement is close to around 2.5 million hectares of area has been brought under this watershed treatment. And where the groundwater levels have gone up, the communities within that watershed areas are reaping the benefits. And also we are giving concessional finance to make that ecosystem very vibrant. So now when we are looking into all these things, I feel that there is a need to have a very pragmatic look at about really what exactly is the water. Now, as the previous speakers were telling, actually India is the only one country probably which worships rivers, which gives harati to rivers, which does everything, but at the same time, which we gave a hood for the rivers. As you see that some places the sludge is also coming to the river, and so that is why it's happening. So now, the time already that having realized already there's so many things are happening with regard to that Clean Ganga project and other things. But at the same time, when I look into it, that maybe the efficiency levels of all these projects are still is an asking. Actually, we have to improve the entire efficiency levels of the sludge water treatment. So when I look into all these aspects, I feel that the water scarcity, I don't say that it is going to maybe kill the Indian civilization or anything in the next even 1,000 years to come, because that kind of a situation is very rare. As I see that year after year, the monsoon almost remains same, maybe barring maybe few of the cycles, so maybe sometimes maybe once in 5 years there may be drought. Depending on the El Nino or La Nina effect, whatever we are facing at the global level, barring that unevenly it is happening. But at the same time, only one thing I can say that now when we are abusing water in some of the geographies, like the present pollution of Delhi is a consequence of the policy change to conserve the groundwater, which probably may be conserving the groundwater, but at the same time it is polluting the entire city of Delhi. Because if somebody recall that Delhi before 2008 and Delhi after 2008. Before 2008, never there was a smog because those two governments have not made any kind of an embargo to cultivate paddy during the. But now the moment they state that they brought a kind of a caveat saying that no kind of a paddy production can happen in the peak summer, the paddy production season itself has shifted from April, May to close to June, July, so they get a very little window. For the next crop, that is why this entire burning of the straw is happening. So now you have consequences. If you control one, probably there will be other things. So now the best part of the thing is that there should be a kind of a pricing of water. Now pricing of water or maybe the pricing of power, because many of the states in their populistic kind of a thing, they started giving free power, which is the reason for abuse of water. So in case if you can price the power little steeply in those areas where the ecological imbalance is happening, probably people may automatically switch over to other so much of the water. So this is the first thing which I'll say that maybe as the one who is investing so much of money in the water structures, irrigation instruments, and also the micro irrigation structures, watershed areas, and also trying to look into really how the production and productivity are both are maybe ensured. So I say that these are the things which we can do. The second thing is increasing the value of water productivity, because recently a year back NABARD and ICRIER has conducted a water productivity mapping, and there we found that there are many inefficient things are happening, and if you look into that maybe the water productivity levels, India is just maybe per cubic meter of water, our entire productivity value is around 3 units, while it is 14 in China. So now there itself actually we are almost 5 times less than China. If you can improve our systems, both the way of delivery and also the new cultivars, and at the same time other things, definitely things are going to happen. So then I'll say that the crisis is there, but this crisis is not uniform. That is why maybe some of the geographies are having a real problem while the others are not having. So those who are not having problem may not be able to appreciate that there is a water scarcity anytime in their life. But thing is, having seen the country all over and also investing in every kind of a structure everywhere, I'll say that states like Punjab, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, parts of Andhra Pradesh, then now you go to parts of Maharashtra, even Madhya Pradesh, and then Gujarat, they're all really facing the crisis. Maybe I'm not saying that in the next 20 years, heavens are going to fall, but at the same time that they are having their own issues, and the policy makers and also this kind of a forums, that PNP kind of forums should bring home the point that how the patched areas or maybe the water starved areas should really do something in an integrated way so that they will ensure the sustainability. And from NABARD side, we are doing our level best to ensure that every place, every field is protected, and nobody should be denied his right to cultivate the crop, or maybe no citizen should be denied his right to have the safe drinking water as enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are doing our level best, and I am very optimistic that maybe the policy planners, Government of India, various state governments, along with institutions like NABARD and the agencies like yours, are going to create a very positive kind of a maybe an outlook, and also give the recommendations so that we would be able to ensure the sustainability of water availability to everyone. It is for the farmer, for the citizen as a whole, for the industry, and for everyone. So with this, I'd like to thank organizers and also everyone who is on the panel that for organizing this kind of a great seminar, which definitely has got a very great relevance, as wars on drinking water are already happening in Africa, though that kind of situation may not come in India, but at the same time, one should be a little cautious without any kind of a prejudice and bias. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Chintala, for your thoughtful speech. You have rightly highlighted that water scarcity is there, but it is obviously in a spatial manner. It is not on same extent everywhere. And as you have rightly pointed out, we should think of the breaking of water energy nexus, a very serious problem in India, and also look for enhancing the water productivity. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us and sharing your thoughts with us and telling about the NABARD activity, a big bank, big activity, also in water sector. Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Sri G.C. Pati. He is the chairman of both Central Groundwater Board and as well as Central Groundwater Authority. Dr. Pati holds an MSc in Geology from Utkal University and PG diploma from University of Jerusalem, Israel, and he served Central Groundwater Board for a long period, and he held many posts: regional director, senior scientist, then member secretary, Central Groundwater Board, then head of the our National Training Institute of Raipur. A very illustrious career, very knowledgeable, and one of the I would say he's considered as one of the best groundwater professional in India. So I will now request Sri G.C. Pati to share his thoughts in the inaugural session of the seminar. Mike, over to you. Pati Saab. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. A very good morning to all my co-panelists in this inaugural session and all the participants. At the outset, I congratulate and thank the organizers for taking up such an important topic, that is looming water crisis in India. What are the challenges ahead? I must say that our Secretary Minister of Jal Shakti, UP Singh Saab, have talked at length regarding this subject. But anyway, I shall start by reiterating that water is essential for the survival of humankind, and it is vital for growth of our economy and is a critical component of our economy. We cannot imagine any activity which can be done without water. With the increase in population worldwide and also the changing needs, gradually the water is entering into a phase of crisis. If you remember, there was a study by a committee of the United Nations which has revealed that about 1 billion people living in a group of countries, including parts of India and China, will face water scarcity of unusual dimensions in the near future if judicious measures are not taken immediately. Similar is the case. We can say that India also is heading at the present pace if no amendments are being made to the present pace. What is needed? That the water should be free from contaminants, it should be at the desired level, and it should be available to meet the normal needs of all the stakeholders continuously and at an economic price. That is the requirement. So keeping this thing in view, if we consider whether our water resources which are available now, whether really we are in a scarce condition, or we are having sufficient water which is judiciously managed, whether it will be really not insufficient for our requirements. So if we see, though we have problems because with only about 4% of the renewable water resources of the world, India has to cater to about 17 to 18% of the population and about 15% of the cattle population of the world. Already our previous speakers have spoken. I will again say that we receive about 3,880 billion cubic meter of water through precipitation, snowfall, etc., which in no way is insufficient to manage the things. But in fact, we have only the utilizable water sources from surface and groundwater is about 1122 billion cubic meters. Out of that, 690 is surface water and 432 is groundwater. But if we consider this groundwater, which is about 2/3 of the surface water, but it caters to the greater needs of our nation, which I'll be elaborating later. Why it has happened? Because of its nature, that it's available everywhere and it's very much approachable, and a lot of other facilities which groundwater provides. For that reason, it has become the most preferred source of water for various user sectors in India. And one of the paradoxes is that India tops the list of top 10 groundwater withdrawing nations in the world. Our withdrawal is more than USA and China taken together, which are at the second and third places respectively. Our groundwater extraction is nearly 250 billion cubic meters, and it accounts for about 25% of the total world's withdrawal. And the unfortunate part is that though we withdraw this much of water, our water footprint in all the fields, be it agriculture, be it industry, everywhere it is too high. And that's what our secretary was speaking. If we judiciously manage, we have to manage, rather we have to devise means to go for reducing this water footprint, so that really the water demand will not rise in future, but we will be able to utilize this excess water which was unnecessarily utilizing, so that it will be helpful in producing the necessary food grains and the industrial productions. So, if I again consider the our groundwater, it accounts for about 85% of the rural water supply, 50%, nearly 50% of the urban water supply, and nearly 62% of the total irrigated area in India is now covered by groundwater. And the most important paradox is that everybody, of course, we know that after independence, to make India self-sufficient in food grain production, a lot of importance was given to surface water, and a lot of dams, reservoirs were created, and all the public efforts were put on surface water. But this is the paradox. If you see the irrigated area, which has increased in the last 4 to 5 decades, 80% of that has been contributed by groundwater. That is the paradox. And to go for the exact figures, about 30 million hectares have been added between 70 and 2007, and out of that 80%, that is about 24 million hectares, is from groundwater. So, as we were, our secretary was also telling that there was some reports. Of course, I will not go to the base where from it has originated, but there are a lot of reports in the media, and so much of talk about that a few cities are going to go out of water or go dry of water by 2020. And since much talk was being made regarding the groundwater, a committee was constituted, and fortunately I was the chairman of that committee to bring about the facts, so that there will be no panic. Anyway, I am not going to elaborate that. Our secretary has also spoken at length about that. So now coming to our point, that as I have said, that we are the topmost extractor of groundwater in the world, that has its side effects, that now about 17% of our groundwater assessment units are overexploited, and about 5% are critical. And if you see that groundwater in large part of our country has contaminants which exceed their respective limits of use in a major part of our country, and the major constituents which are hazardous are arsenic, fluoride, nitrate, and in some cases also we are having iron to some extent, which is though not considered so hazardous, but it is rendering the water unsuitable for use. So if we consider the water distribution, because now we are talking about the scarcity of water or crisis of water, we can see that groundwater, which our secretary has already said, which constitutes the major portion of the total freshwater resources, that its distribution is very much skewed. There is a mismatch between the availability and the demands. If you can see that most of our resources, that is in the alluvial areas, which are restricted to 20% of the geographical area, about 80% of the resources, 70 to 80% of the resources are restricted to the alluvial area, and the rest part, which is about 80% in area, has the resources about 20 to 30%. That is one of the major problems. And again, the groundwater, which is now has almost become a dependable source by many stakeholders, because in the irrigated areas, when the surface water doesn't reach, and in the urban areas, when the committed supply do not reach, people resort to the groundwater use. By that, the groundwater is getting more and more exploited, rather overexploited. So if we now consider the development percentage in India, we can see that in northern states mostly, that is Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, And here we find that the groundwater resource has been developed to more than 100%. That means the groundwater which is withdrawn annually is more than the replenishable groundwater resource, the recharge annual groundwater recharge. And in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, it is between 75 to 100%. And in the southern states, mostly, and also part of UP, also the eastern UP, we get about 50 to 75%. And in the rest of India, it is less, that is 50%. So here comes, as our secretary has said, that in different parts, the agriculture which is now being practiced is actually not sustainable. We now produce a lot of paddy, rice in the states of Punjab and Haryana and this northern states, where actually the rainfall pattern, the climate is actually not suitable. Natural climate is not suitable for cultivation of these type of crops. But because of so many other factors which I need not mention here, so paddy is being cultivated here as a cash crop, and gradually it has dwindled the groundwater resources. So there is a necessity that we should distribute this crops uh, in different parts of India so that they become commensurate with the availability of the resources in those areas without affecting adversely to the natural resources. So for that reason, what we have to do is we have to go for the management of the resources, both the demand and the supply, and also for that reason, so many measures have to be undertaken. There is a need for development, scientific development of the water resources. There is a need for conjunctive use. We have seen in many of our canal command areas what happens, that will be always waterlogging condition in the upper reaches because of the greedy irrigation by the people and sometimes mismanagement in the water supply, and there is scarcity of water in the tail end areas, and the water doesn't reach to the fields which were supposed to get water. So in those cases, the conjunctive use will be very much useful. You can draw the water from the upper reaches where it is making the fields waterlogged, and that water can be put to the canals and can be very well supplied to the tail end areas. Similarly, also in the urban areas, the conjunctive use should be practiced. Wherever the groundwater is alarmingly getting depleted, so there measures should be taken to protect those resources. And the most important factor, which is yet to be properly given importance in India, is the reuse of water. As we have seen that there is overexploitation of groundwater, that is crisis of surface water, there is conflict between different user sectors in different places, there is conflict between the states, that is conflict between the communities because of the water scarcity. So for that reason, there is a necessity that we start treating to the tertiary level, to the level so that it can be utilized again. This water it can be utilized and also can also be utilized for the recharge. We normally do not advocate in our department Central Groundwater Board to use the treated water for groundwater recharge, but here I must say that we should practice the groundwater recharge through the treated water, but there we should have some means which should ensure that there should be full ensurement that the water never, unpolluted water never goes into the aquifers. Then in the urban areas, mostly where because that those reports were saying that these so many cities will be dried up, they will be without water. But if you see in cities, about 85% of the water supply goes as the effluents. So if this water is recycled and reused for many purposes, it can be used nicely, then the water crisis can decrease. And then another important point is the management of the water quality. The water quality is gradually, day by day, is deteriorating because of the human activities, because of the irresponsible disposal of our waste products, the sewerage and the effluents, all these things. The proper care should be taken, and the industries should religiously adopt practices so that they do not pollute the water resources, so that that will be utilized, it will be available for our use. Then the recharge sources, which are the most vital ones, they should be protected for water quality also, and also they should be maintained in such a condition that they do the job which they are supposed to. As we have seen, our secretary was telling also that in many of the rivers which were being their lifeline was dependent on the best flow from groundwater during the non-monsoon season, are now getting dried up during major part of our non-monsoon season. And also the rivers which are originating from the Himalayas, and though they get fed from the snow melt, they are also getting water from the springs. The springs of late have started dwindling because of the mismanagement. So these things should be managed properly. And as already our secretary was telling, that the flood plains which really belong to the floods, not to us, they should be protected in proper way, so that there will be a very good source of recharge during the monsoon, and they will be also able to supply water during our need. And then the most important part is our coastal aquifers. We are having really proliferous, very rich aquifers in our coastal areas, though they have problems of salinity, brackish in some places. They have the sensitivity of connected to the seawater. Of course, their development needs very cautious approach, but they are huge repository of groundwater, which can be utilized, of course, in a properly managed format, so that they are not deteriorated because of the seawater intrusion, and also there will be a great possibility of supply of water from this coastal aquifers to our different areas. And as already I have said, that this crisis management also requires the demand side management. That supply side already I have said, and the demand side management means we should do the crop diversification. The crop diversification has its own socio-political impact and socio-political requirements also. So that should be judiciously managed, and the crops where they should be grown there only, and proper irrigation efficiency management should be there. There should be micro irrigation and other things. Similarly, for the industries, wherever they should also practice the efficiency in water use, because the water footprint of industries in India also is dismal. It is among the highest in the world. So that should also be managed. And besides, as already our previous speaker Chintala Sahab also has said, that the monsoon rainfall, or the rainfall, which is the major source of recharge, is really more or less constant over the years. So, but the only problem is that the recharge which was occurring naturally is getting reduced because of different problems, and also there is a deterioration in water quality. So for that reason, a lot of efforts has to be taken, and in fact, many states have started some programs on their own. There are just like in Haryana, that is eligible. Similarly, in Andhra Pradesh, there is Niru Chetu and so many other things. Then Jal Yukt Shivar in Maharashtra, and so many other programs. Adi Bandhati Adi Yojana in Odisha, and in West Bengal there is a program also is there. And through MG Narega, a lot of efforts are being now made by the central government to have the artificial recharge or water conservation, which definitely, if managed properly, will go a long way in conserving our water resources and augmenting the resources so that the looming water crisis can be solved to some extent. Though some efforts are being done, but that needs to be tuned properly, and that needs to be associated with the proper scientific know-how. They have to be implemented in the proper manner. So the challenges in the water sector are much, that we admit, but with proper management, we will not face problem in the near future, because we are having so many sources. We are getting so much of rainfall, which is the order of about 1000 to 1100 millimeters, which is not happening in many parts of the world. And we are yet to utilize the resources like our this recycled water. We are yet to utilize our deeper aquifers. We are yet to utilize our coastal aquifers. So there is a lot of scope that we will be able to get this water, of course, in a proper management format. We can utilize this water so that the water crisis for the future can be eradicated. So with this, I thank the organizers for taking up such an important topic, and I think in the sessions which are going to follow, there things will be elaborated to a greater detail, and I think the conclusions and the recommendations which will be made from this webinar, that will definitely help the planners and the government to incorporate those for the betterment, so that we may not face the water crisis which is looming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patisa, for your very enriching thoughts and telling all nuts and bolts of water resources issues, groundwater, surface water, both. And of course, if we can manage, then in immediate future, there cannot be any countrywide scarcity, maybe some scarcity here and there. But thank you for your speech. Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Ms. Corinne Demens. She is the head of international cooperation and counselor in the Embassy of Switzerland to India. And a very short brief about Ms. Demens. She holds a MPhil in International Development Studies from Oxford University, England, and MA in International Studies from the Graduate Institute of International Studies, Geneva, Switzerland. She joined the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation in 2008. In August 2020, he took up the position of the head of international cooperation at the Swiss Embassy in New Delhi. She is looking after the SDC work in India, and she worked previously in many countries like in Tajikistan, in Bern, in Nepal. So wide experience, and we are eager to hear you, madam. The floor is yours. Please, madam.
Good morning, everybody. Honorable panel speakers, dear listeners. It's a great honor for me to be with you today and to discuss the looming water crisis in India, but also globally. And because the time is already a little bit advanced, I tried to be short, not to repeat what the distinguished speakers said before me. They're absolutely the experts on the topic. What I can share is, I come from a country, Switzerland, that is known as the castle of water in Europe. So we still have a lot of groundwater, surface water, but with the rising temperature due to climate change, our glaciers are melting extremely fast. So we've seen a lot of changes in the river flows, for example. We have too much water in spring. We don't have enough now water in summer. So even Switzerland, that you see in the Bollywood films as this green, lush country, we're very concerned because we know water is the new gold. Water is what we need to secure for the next generation. And Switzerland, it's not just about the water that we have, but we actually 80% of our footprint is water footprint is used abroad. So because we import a lot of products from abroad, 80% of the water we consume as Swiss is outside of Switzerland. And we are concerned, and we need to make sure that we use the water resources efficiently. And I think this is exactly where Honorable Secretary Mr. Singh was extremely right, saying that we are not yet efficient enough in using the scarce resources. So we, Switzerland, have made quite a lot of efforts. We invested in new technologies, invested in really at the supply side level, demand side level. There's a huge pressure from the people to look at different issues, especially also water pollution. But what I want to say here, it's a global crisis, as many of the other speakers said. We're sitting in the same boat as India. It's something that we're concerned, and Switzerland stands ready to support India at the level of the government, private sector, but also the civil society. And I think, I don't want to repeat what was said for India, but it really needs a concerted effort. We need to make sure that the actions come at the different levels. We've seen a lot of good actions at the government level. There's a lot of action at the civil society level and the private sector. Maybe one thing that is really important, we need to bring the men and the women on board. What I've not heard often is sometimes we forget 50% of the population, and the women have an important role to play here. So we need to really include them, and also the children, the next generation. It's only if the children understand the importance of water efficiency, water saving, and we really have the hope that we will find the solutions. Maybe just a few words about Switzerland and the work we've done in India. You know, Switzerland, through the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, has for a long been active in water resource management in partnership with the national, state, and more recently, municipal authorities in India. SDC foray in the sector started with its support to the implementation of the watershed management programs in the 1990s. A support that was gradually evolved to integrate approaches towards climate proofing in response to the growing climate change concerns. As part of this effort, SDC has supported the restoration of traditional water harvesting structures, enhancing groundwater recharge, and promoting mixed cropping systems with drought-resilient seeds in semi-arid and drought-affected regions. And more recently, as part of its partnership with Niti Aayog, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Department of Science and Technology, and the Himalayan states, SDC has been working across the Himalayan region to build capacities of the state entities on glacial hydrological modeling and integrated water resource management, as well as spring revival and spring shed management. As part of our intervention on promoting solar irrigation systems across South Asia, SDC has supported the development and the promotion of approaches that promote efficient use of water resources and thereby support groundwater conservation. Maybe not restricting it just to smaller actions, SDC has been working with the state and municipal entities in order to address the challenges in efficient management of their water resources. For instance, SDC is supporting the city of Rajkot to address the issue of urban flooding with better drainage and using the flood water for recharging the groundwater. SDC is also partnering with the government of Madhya Pradesh for developing a decision support system to help in resource allocation from its medium to large-scale surface water reservoirs. There is no doubt the efforts made by governments are extremely important. At the same time, Switzerland recognizes the critical role of the private sector in managing the water resources. And I'm happy to share that SDC has been successfully partnering with the private sector partners to reduce the water footprint of the agricultural sector in India. SDC supported the water productivity project, the project called WAPRO, very interesting name, WAPRO, you should remember it, aims at improving the household economy combined with the promotion of efficient production of rice and cotton of 80,000 smallhold families in Central and South Asia. The project, in order to motivate rice and cotton farmers, tries to make them more efficient with irrigation water and other inputs, offer smallholders technical assistance and market access, while private companies enter into reliable business partnerships. In India, the project works with the basmati rice farmers in Uttarakhand and Haryana, with Helvetia Swiss Intercorporation and Partners in Prosperity, and on cotton in the state of Gujarat with the Better Cotton Initiative. Later in the day, I'm sure you will hear more about this project. Maybe just one last call. It's despite all these efforts that Switzerland has been supporting, I think we need to do more. We need to do more at all levels, as I said. And I think this seminar today is an extremely valuable platform to discuss what concretely has to be done. Has to be done by all of us, by each individual, by each organization, by each entity. And I'm very happy to be with you today. And I look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam, for your enriching words. And in India, Switzerland is an extremely popular country. And whenever people remind of Switzerland, they think of snow. And we see in all our Bollywood movies that the snow-clad Switzerland. So we are worried if you face water crisis. But it is heartening to note that a lot of SDC involvement is there in India, and India and Switzerland is closely working in the water sector and obviously through WAPRO activities. Thank you, madam, again. Now I invite Dr. K.R. Viswanathan, Chairman, Partners in Prosperity, for proposing a vote of thanks. A short brief about Dr. K.R. Viswanathan. He has 35 years of experience in the development sector, covering a wide range of themes and sectors. He's a widely known expert in the field of environment. He has been working as a senior operational and management position, which include principal director in the armed force. So he was in army also, in Ministry of Defense, Joint Commissioner in the Ministry of Agriculture, Deputy Country Director at SDC, and International Climate Change Specialist in International Consulting Organization. He worked in a number of international organizations, widely experienced person. So now the floor is to you, Dr. Viswanathan, please.
Good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much, Dr. Saha, for your kind words. Distinguished speakers on the opening session. It gives me a great pleasure to be a part of this e-seminar and to be among the galaxy of experts who virtually constitute the who's who of the water sector in India. The previous speakers spoke at length on how that we are in a very crucial stage as far as the water is concerned. The very fact that the water crisis has engulfed in India in a big way can be judged from the very fact that in the Prime Minister during his Independence Day speech from the ramparts of Red Fort in August 2019, when he delivered the speech, he used the word water 28 times. That really speaks volumes of the importance that not only the government but also the people attach to the water. We heard from the previous speakers about the state that we are in India as far as the water situation is concerned. On the face of it, it looks as water crisis. But when it goes, when you go into depth, when you look at the fact that 80 to 90% of the water is consumed by the agriculture sector, so it looks really a matter of time before the water crisis could possibly switch into a food crisis and eventually an economic crisis subsequently. So, um, for us, it's never too late to undertake serious reflections on water crisis, the looming water crisis in the country, in terms of what could be done now and what could be done in future to ensure that we avert any emergency situation. So, on behalf of Partners in Prosperity and on behalf of our knowledge partners, which is A3, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment, Central Groundwater Board, Helvetus Intercorporation, IIT Kharagpur, International Association of Hydrogeologists, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. It's my great pleasure to thank all the speakers who have really shared not only their experiences but also their perspectives and advice with us. I would like to individually thank them. Secretary Water Resources Development, Mr. UP Singh, had in his speech really offered some hope for us. It's yes, it's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity for us to do something positive and retrieve the situation, the retrievers from the situation that we are in. So he really was very optimistic in his note, and he also mentioned about how the inefficiency of India is also going to help, because we were not only watering the plants, but we were also watering the earth, which helped in recharge. So that was an interesting point. And he also highlighted the importance of addressing more of the demand issues. Of course, a lot has been done in addressing the supply issues, so we need to move into the demand issues. We'd also like to express our gratitude to Dr. Chintala, Chairman NABARD, who in his speech advocated diversity of approaches in terms of how different organizations, the government, the non-government, the private sector, the business organization, the corporates, the development finance organization, international organization can all join hands, both in terms of working together on and pulling our talent in terms of addressing the issues of water. Our warm thanks also go to Mr. G.C. Pati, Chairman of Central Groundwater Board and Central Groundwater Authority, who dealt a great deal on the groundwater situation in the country, as to how many of the so-called blocks are turning into overexploited or critical. Just not the quantity of water, but the very quality of the water, how it is getting deteriorated. And he offered a lot of solution in terms of how we could, improve the situation, not only in terms of governance, but also in terms of equity. Our heartful thanks to Ms. Corinne Dement, Head of Development Cooperation in SDC, who shared us. Maybe it's a matter of consolation for us to hear that not only India, but also a country like Switzerland, which is considered as the water tower of Europe, are in the same development boat. Just not India and Switzerland, many countries of the world are in the same development boat as far as the water sector or water situation is concerned. And I think we're also grateful to her for having offered an important suggestion of taking into consideration the aspects relating to gender equity and equality whenever we talk in terms of water conservation, water management, water development, etc. So grateful thanks to all the speakers. And we are talking in terms of looming crisis. In army, we say that you sweat more in peace during the peacetime, so that you shed less blood in war. So that's what precisely we are doing. How we could avoid the situation of shifting into an emergency as far as the water situation is concerned. Lastly, my grateful thanks and appreciation to my colleagues, Dr. Dipankar Saha, Senior Advisor with PNP, as well as Dr. Manav Chakrabarti, who have really worked hard together with colleagues in WAPRO to make this e-seminar, a day-long e-seminar reality. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Saha, who will take you to the subsequent sessions. Thank you very much and have a good day ahead.